Corporal Carrot awoke around 4 a.m., that secret hour known only to night people, such as criminals, policemen, and other misfits. He lay on his half of the narrow bed and stared at the wall. It had definitely been an interesting night. Although he was indeed simple, he wasn't stupid, and he'd always been aware of what might be called the mechanics. He'd been acquainted with several young ladies and had taken them on many invigorating walks to see fascinating ironwork and interesting civic buildings until they'd unaccountably lost interest. He'd patrolled the whore pits often enough, although Mrs. Palm and the Guild of Seamstresses were trying to persuade the patrician to rename the area the Street of Negotiable Affection. But he'd never seen them in relation to himself, had never been quite sure, as it were, where he fitted in. This was probably not something he was going to write to his parents about. They almost certainly knew. He slid out of bed. The room was stifling hot with the curtains drawn. Behind him, he heard Angua roll over into the hollow left by his body. Then, with both hands and considerable vigor, he threw open the curtains and let in the round, white light of the full moon. Behind him, he thought he heard Angua sigh in her sleep. There were thunderstorms out on the plain. Carrot could see lightning flashes stitching the horizon, and he could smell rain, but the air of the city was still and baking, all the hotter for the distant prospect of storms. The university's Tower of Art loomed in front of him. He saw it every day. It dominated half the city. Behind him, the bed went glink. "I think there's going to be," he began, and turned. As he turned away, he missed the glint of moonlight on metal from the top of the tower. Sergeant Colon sat on the bench outside the baking air of the Watchhouse. There was a hammering noise from somewhere inside. Cuddy had come in 10 minutes before with a bag of tools, a couple of helmets, and a determined expression. Colon was damned if he knew what the little devil was working on. He counted again, very slowly, ticking off names on his clipboard. No doubt about it. The Night Watch had almost 20 members now, maybe more. Detritus had gone critical, and had sworn in a further 2 men, another troll, and a wooden dummy from outside Corksock's Natty Clothing Company. Author's note, and was the origin, long after the events chronicled here were over, of an Ankh Moorpork folk song scored for tin whistle and nasal passage. As I was a-walking along Lower Broadway, the recruiting party came picking up people by their ankles and saying they were going to volunteer to join the watch unless they wanted their coholing heads kicked in. So I went via Peach Pie Street and Holofernes instead, singing Torali, etc. It never really caught on. End author's note. If this went on, they'd be able to open the old watchhouses near the main gates, just like the old days. He couldn't remember when the watch last had 20 men. It had all seemed a good idea at the time. It was certainly keeping the lid on things, but in the morning, the patrician was going to get to hear about it and demand to see the superior officer. Now, Sergeant Colon was not entirely clear in his own mind who was the superior officer at the moment. He felt that it should be either Captain Vimes or in some way he couldn't quite define Corporal Carrot. But the captain wasn't around, and Corporal Carrot was only a corporal. And Fred Colon had a dreadful apprehension that when Lord Vetinari summoned someone in order to be ironical at them and say things like, "Who's going to pay for their wages, pray?" it would be him, Fred Colon, well and truly up the Ankh without a paddle. They were also running out of ranks. There were only 4 ranks below the rank of sergeant. Nobby was getting stroppy about anyone else being promoted to corporal. So there was a certain amount of career congestion taking place. Besides, some of the watch had got it into their heads that the way you got promoted was to conscript half a dozen other guards. At Detritus's current rate of progress, he was going to be High Supreme Major General by the end of the month. And what made it all strange was that Carrot was still only a... Colon looked up when he heard the tinkle of broken glass. Something golden and indistinct crashed through an upper window, landed in the shadows, and fled before he could make out what it was. The watchhouse door slammed open, and Carrot emerged, sword in hand. "Where'd he go? Where'd he go?"
"Don't know. What the hell was it?"
Carrot stopped. Not sure," he said.
"Carrot?
"Sarge?"
I should put some clothes on if I was you, lad."
Carrot stayed, looking into the pre-dawn gloom. I turned around, and there it was, and he looked down at the sword in his hand, as if he hadn't realized that he was carrying it. "Oh, damn," he said. He ran back to his room and grabbed his breeches. As he struggled into them, he was suddenly aware of a thought in his head, clear as ice. "You are a pillock, what are you? Picked up the sword automatically, didn't you? Did it all wrong. Now she's run off, and you'll never see her again." He turned. A small gray dog was watching him intently from the doorway. "Shock like that, she might never change back again," said his thoughts. "Who cares if she's a werewolf? That didn't bother you until you knew. Incidentally, any biscuits about your person could be usefully thrown to the small dog in the doorway, although come to think of it, the chances of having a biscuit on you right now are very small, so forget you ever thought it. Blimey, you really messed that up, right?" thought Carrot. "Wuff wuff," said the dog. Carrot's forehead wrinkled. "It's you, isn't it?" he said, pointing his sword. "Me? Dogs don't talk," said Gaspode hurriedly. "Listen, I should know. I am one." "You tell me where she's gone, right now, or—" "Yeah? Look," said Gaspode gloomily. "The first thing I remember in my life, right? The first thing was being thrown into the river in a sack, with a brick. Me! I had wobbly legs and a humorously inside-out ear. I was fluffy. Okay, right, so it was the Ankh. Okay, so I could walk ashore. But that was the start, and it ain't never got much better. I walked ashore inside the sack, dragging the brick. It took me 3 days to chew my way out. Go on. Threaten me." "Please?" said Carrot. Gaspode scratched his ear. "Maybe I could track her down," said Gaspode. "Given the right, encouragement." He waggled his eyebrows encouragingly. "If you find her, I'll give you anything you want," said Carrot. "Oh, well, if. Right. Oh, yes, that's all very well, is if. What about something up front? Look at these paws, eh? Wear and tear. And this nose doesn't smell by itself. It is a finely tuned instrument." "If you don't start looking right away," said Carrot, "I will personally—" He hesitated. He'd never been cruel to an animal in his life. "I'll turn the matter over to Corporal Nobbs," he said. "That's what I like," said Gaspode bitterly. "Incentive." He pressed his blotchy nose to the ground. It was all show, anyway. Angua's scent hung in the air like a rainbow. "You can really talk?" said Carrot. Gaspode rolled his eyes. "Course not," he said.